Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May 6th regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. We also have, or had, Councillor Gesselbrock in attendance, I believe, electronically. Yes, there he is. Thank you. Tonight's regular meeting of Council is being held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. And if during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet by the double doors to my left and the question period sign-up sheet. And please note that the questions are for agenda items only. Before we start the meeting, I would like to take a few moments to remind those who are attending in person about the rules of decorum for all council and committee meetings. A meeting of council is intended to be a place where democracy can freely take place in a respectful and safe manner. The council chambers is a workplace, and there are considerations council and staff must make to ensure that a safe work environment exists in accordance with WorkSafe BC regulations. To support this, disrespectful conduct will not be tolerated, so we ask that there be no cheering or jeering or other outbursts from the gallery at any time. This will ensure that anyone speaking, whether it be a delegation, member of council, or staff, is not interrupted and can make their point freely without distraction or fear of ridicule. In instances where a speaker is being inappropriate or has exceeded their time limit, their microphone will be cut off. Similarly, if there are outbursts by any person in the gallery, they will be asked to stop. And if they do not comply, they may be asked to leave as permitted under Section 133 of the Community Charter. If necessary, Council may call a recess in order to reset the environment of the Council chambers. It is our belief that if everyone is respectful of these basic considerations, this meeting and future meetings will be more effective in furthering the business of the City of Nanaimo. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Gurry, we have a few, please.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Good evening, Council. We're adding a delegation, Sid Landholt, for development permit application number DP 1307 for 924 Old Victoria Road. They are available if there's any questions from Council. For agenda item 12E, we're adding a PowerPoint presentation regarding increasing housing options and small-scale multi-unit housing. And we are removing agenda item 15B, which was a request noted on the agenda from Councillor Brown regarding attendance at the Local Government Management Association conference. And that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Motion for adoption of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Manley. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Thorpe. All those in favour? Any opposed? None. Mayor's report. I have a few items to read tonight. Firstly, we are coming to National Public Works Week. On Wednesday, May the 22nd, the City of Nanaimo's Public Works Department will host more than 400 grade 4 and 5 students and 200 members of the public to highlight Public Works Week. A student-only session will take place earlier in the day, which will feature interactive stations in the Public Works Yard. Public Works staff will engage students in learning about road maintenance, water distribution, solid waste, recycling, and more. Staff will open the yard for 45-minute public tours between 3 and 5 p.m. Small groups will be guided through a number of stations and parts of the Public Works Yard. Interactive and educational information on how staff respond to weather events and maintain above and below ground infrastructure will provide a glimpse of what is needed to operate and maintain any city services. So a little reminder for everyone, again, the community is invited to register to attend a free open house at Public Works on May 24th from 3 to 5, and National Public Work Week runs from May 19th to the 25th, and this year's theme is Advancing Quality of Life for All. And along with tours, students are invited to submit artwork for next year's t-shirt design. A little reminder for everyone that effective May the 1st, 2024, the new provincial short-term rental requirements came into force. These include short-term rentals that are now only permitted in a primary residence and requiring hosts to display a valid City of Nanaimo business license on their hosting page. This applies to all advertising platforms, Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, etc. Earlier this year, when the province introduced the new legislation, obviously that, if you will, supersedes our local regulations. but we reaffirm our dedication to fostering a balanced and sustainable housing market as new provincial short-term rental regulations come into force. These regulations signify a collaborative effort between the city and the province to address the many housing challenges we face. I want to remind everyone as well that yesterday was Red Dress Day, Sunday, May the 5th, which is held annually in honor of Red Dress Day and the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls and Two-Spirit People. From 2009 to 2021, 490 Indigenous women and girls were victims of homicide in Canada. In this time frame, the rate of homicide of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit women and girls was 6 times higher than the rate among their non-Indigenous counterparts. In Canada, Indigenous women and girls are 12 times more likely to be murdered or missing than any other women in Canada. On behalf of Council, we honor the lives of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people. Our thoughts are with their families and communities as they deal with their grief. And I would simply remind everybody that this is recognized, this country, as the most desirable place in the world to live by peoples in any other nations. That's what international polling shows. And one of the reasons is that we are a tolerant and accepting and welcoming country. And I would expect the same of this community, and each and every citizen should try and live up every day to that ideal. We also, I want to announce the exciting new e-bike share program in Nanaimo. On May the 1st, the city launched its first e-bike share program in partnership with BCAA's Evolve e-bike share. The 2024 pilot program aims to improve transportation in Nanaimo by providing residents with a new, convenient, sustainable, and affordable mobility option. Beginning with 16 parking zones strategically located throughout the city's downtown area in the Old City Quarter, recreational spots like Maffeo Sutton Park and Bowen Park, as well as key commercial and residential centres, the program will gradually expand to cover more areas such as Vancouver University and the hospital. With a fleet of 100 e-bikes planned for launch this year, residents can easily access these electric bicycles through the free Evo app. After downloading the app, simply sign up, locate an available e-bike, unlock it by scanning the bike's QR code, don a helmet available in each Evolve e-bike basket, and start riding. Having been launched on the 1st and starting with these initial zones, I hope everyone will take advantage of this and determine that just maybe, riding an e-bike may be part of their future and a small contribution to reducing carbon emissions and also making us a more livable city. That is it for my mayor's report. Oh, pardon me, one other item, can't forget this. Very positive. Musical acts and concerts for in the park. I want to announce that our Parks, Recreation and Culture Department has announced the schedule for the 2024 Concerts in the Park series. These are free concerts. They showcase local talent against the backdrop of some of our most beautiful parks. Concert goers will have the opportunity to enjoy a variety of music genres, including Motown, indie rock, folk and blues, and Celtic. Audience members are reminded to bring a chair, a blanket, and dress for the weather. New this year, a number of double or triple feature shows which will allow families to enjoy a variety of entertainment along with a picnic or dinner in the park. The 2024 schedule is as follows, and I'm going to read it all out in the hopes that people will take advantage of this wonderful cultural opportunity. Sunday, May the 12th, 1 to 2 p.m., Laura Kelsey at the Colliery Dam Park as part of Family Fishing Day. Friday, May 17th, 6 to 8:15 p.m., mostly Motown and Turnpike at Maffeo Sutton Park. Double feature in partnership with Food Truck Fridays. Wednesday, June the 12th, 6 to 7 p.m., Baby Blue at Kin Park. Friday, June the 28th, 5 to 8:30, the Shindigs, Danger Box, and Maverick Cinema at Maffeo Sutton Park. Triple feature in partnership with Food Truck Fridays. Wednesday, July the 10th, 6 to 7 p.m., Dagger Harbor at McGregor Park. Wednesday, July 17th, 6 to 7 p.m., String Fever at Piper's Lagoon Park. Wednesday, July 31st, 6 to 7 p.m., Cosmic Dust at Harewood Centennial Park. Wednesday, August the 7th, 6 to 7 p.m., Pew at the Bowen Park Amphitheatre. Wednesday, August the 14th, 6 to 7 p.m., Dublin 2 at Oliver Woods. Wednesday, August the 21st, 6 to 7 p.m., Mike Alviano at Westwood Lake Park. And finally, on Friday, August the 23rd, 6 to 8:15 p.m., Sundown, the Gordon Lightfoot Experience, and the Shiniolas, I'm not sure, at Maffeo Sutton Park, double feature in partnership with Food Truck Fridays. Get out, meet fellow citizens, enjoy some local talent, and enjoy the beautiful parks our city has to provide. We have one thing to rise and report on, Ms. Scurry, and that is the appointment to the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness. During the 2024 April 22nd in-camera council meeting, council appointed Sarah Pump as an at-large member to the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness for a term ending October 16th, 2026. And I know Councillors Armstrong and Eastmere will welcome her to participate. Next, we have presentations tonight. I'm very pleased to welcome Inspector Andrew Burton, Nanaimo RCMP Detachment, who is going to make a presentation on the 2024-2025 Nanaimo Detachment Annual Performance Plan Priorities. Inspector Burton, good evening and welcome. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much. So good evening, Your Worship and members of Council. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you today to address some things. Three things that I'd like to talk to you tonight. The first one, as you mentioned, Your Worship, is the annual performance plan, which is the RCMP's policing priorities. So essentially, this is a roadmap of where we want to go for 2024-25 and what priorities are important to our communities. Each detachment and several large units throughout Canada are required to provide this. It's formed through statistical analysis, consultation with our communities and stakeholders, as well as input through our headquarters in Ottawa, in British Columbia, in Surrey, and as well in Victoria. So the first, as you can see, again, this is by no means an exhaustive or detailed list, but more of a framework for where we're looking to go for success this year. Obviously, crime, we are the police. Crime reduction is a big issue. I think I've been before you and spoke about the successes of our REVOI, our repeat violent offenders, as well as our SITE team, special investigation and targeted enforcement, and this is prolific and violent offender management. So this is something that we've really enjoyed the success with this since September, and we're going to continue along that road. As I said, we've had some big inroads with this type of enforcement and some great success. The second one that we've had certainly a lot of success with as well is our PTEP program. This is the provincial tactical enforcement priority, and this is led by our projects team or our drug unit, where targets are identified through the PTEP process, and we receive funding through the PTEP into drug traffickers and PTEP targets. The third that we're going to be concentrating on the crime reduction side is our youth section. We have a very robust school resource or youth unit at the detachment, some very dedicated officers. One of the things that we've noticed across British Columbia, specifically in the Lower Mainland, is the influx of youth gangs or gangs that are targeting youth in the schools. So we've developed some really tried and true gang awareness strategies. We've been presenting these in the schools and had some real big success with those. So we're looking to continue along that road. Obviously, road safety is always a big one for us. We've had some terrible, tragic, fatal accidents, incidents in this last year, and obviously we're looking to combat impaired driving, distracted drivers, so look for more road checks and actions in that regard as well. Moving on to, there we go, oops. Yeah, there we go, employee wellness. So this is for our own employees, not only for our members, but for our civilian staff as well. Obviously, the work that the police are tasked with can be very challenging at times. You'll note there it says ODS management. That's an internal term for off-duty sick. The Nanaimo Detachment certainly has its fair share of members who are away from work for various reasons, and this is in line with many of the other detachments that are on the Island District and our neighbors as well. So we're looking at strategies to not only get our members back to work when they're off, and to improve the morale of our members and support staff, but also to take steps to mitigate them going off in the first instance. As I said, the work that we do, we're often exposed to some very tragic and terrible things, and it does take its time or take its toll on our members. So we're looking to continue to ensure employee wellness through education and awareness. Number 3 on the list you'll see is inclusion and reconciliation. IPS is Indigenous policing. We have a 2-person unit that is tasked with looking after our 2 nations within our detachment area of Nanaimo. Recently we've had some vacancies in those spots due to the aforementioned members being off. So we really need to reestablish our contingent of officers on this unit and get them back to work and continuing doing the important work that they're tasked with doing. We need to re-engage with our Indigenous communities and our leadership. We share very good relationships.
Part of my background is in education, so I was really interested in one of your first priorities on your first slide. You don't need to go back to it, regarding presentations in schools on gang awareness strategies for youth. And I wonder, I mean, that's a concern if we have gangs attempting to recruit in our local high schools, possibly even elementary schools. I would hope not, but I know they like to ensnare people at a very young age. So along in that topic, could you comment on the what you see as the value and the effectiveness of the school liaison program? We still have officers in our high schools and assigned to different areas, and the feedback I hear is positive, but I'd be curious on your thoughts.
Yes, thank you for the question. Through the chair, Your Worship. We have like I mentioned, we have a great group of dedicated school resource or youth officers. The presentations that they're making in the schools on a weekly basis are very well received and supported, not only by the school district and the teachers and the parents advisory committees, but also, and perhaps most importantly, from the students themselves. We're hearing lots of great feedback and stories of students that perhaps were a little bit lost. They weren't maybe on the sports team, or they weren't on the student council, and this program, this unit provides our officers an opportunity to be in the schools and fairly frequently, so that they become a bit of a known entity there. And while it's not as specialized work as, say, our homicide investigators, I dare say it's equally as important, and we've had some real success with the team that we've got in place for sure. And just to touch on that briefly, and I am probably going over time here, you mentioned about high school, and definitely we're seeing recruiting initiatives from organized crime in the high schools, and sad to say we are seeing it in our elementary schools as well. And these people, I don't want to say they're smart, but they recognize that youth are often the penalties for youth involvement in these type of crimes is less than as an adult, so they're specifically targeting youth. And this can be, they get them on side with a fancy sweatshirt or a new pair of runners, and that's what hooks them, right? They're selling vapes or cigarettes to start, and then we're seeing them progressing into worse commodities. So yeah, it's a sad reality, and it's not. I was surprised when I heard in elementary school, but I can confirm that's been going on.
That is scary and very alarming, but as I say, I'm glad that you've identified it as a priority, and I think it's definitely an important area that your officers need to be involved in, so glad for the work you're doing there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Your Worship, thank you for the presentation. I'm curious about how the REVOI program is going, the Repeat Violent Offenders program. Are you having success with getting people off the street who've been involved in multiple crimes, violent crimes?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Manley, the program is relatively new. It's a new provincial government initiative. It's not a police-led initiative, but certainly we're the key stakeholders in it. And we've had some really good success. And one of the things that I'd like to talk about, perhaps brag about, is the recent success for a snapshot of a month for our site team, our special investigation and targeted enforcement, who do the REVOI work. So yeah, we've had some really good success with that and getting some people the help that they need, and as importantly, protecting our communities from harm.
Okay, thank you. We've been hearing, in the media concerning reports about people with weapons, sawed-off shotguns, things like that, that are being found. So, yeah, it's good to see that people like that are getting the help that they need.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perhaps I will move right into that. Great segue by Councillor Manley. And I would like to just touch on, this is a snapshot every month. As the acting detachment commander, I do receive reports on progress of all of our units. And for our site Revoy team, for the month of April, that team itself completed 70 investigations, and these included 31 downtown public disorder nuisance trespassing files. There was two public violence files, including the assault of a security guard, and some robberies in residential areas. 5 controlled drugs and substances or drug statute acts, where we seized a vehicle and a significant amount of cash, as well as a half kilogram of drugs and various weapons. So there's been some real success on that side. Talking about the weapons, we've seized brass knuckles. During an assault police officer investigation, a loaded pistol and bear spray was located on the suspect. Various knives and clubs as well were seized. We've had significant breach activity where people have been released on conditions and then released and contravened the conditions that they were released on. One of the things that we're seeing is making a real making itself known for us, and it's fairly recent, is Excise Act charges, which is basically unstamped cigarettes. We're seeing a lot of cigarettes that are being circumvented through the tax system and sold at a cheaper price than what we would paying for them in the store. This is another commodity. A lot of these people are organized crime, and they are. It's just one more commodity, whether it's meth or fentanyl or cocaine or heroin. Cigarettes has now made its appearance on that. So we've seen that with significance. It's almost overnight that cropped up. And as well, they were involved in some specialized unit surveillance work and some traffic charges as well, Motor Vehicle Act charges. If there's no questions on that, I'd like to move on to my last point, which is again with regards to our site or Revoy team. I'm very pleased and a little bit excited to announce a new initiative starting on June the 1st, which will see 4 of our officers deployed to address community concerns. These officers will be conducting foot patrols in strategic hotspots, as we call them, and they'll work closely with the RCMP bike section, our city partners in the community safety officer and bylaw section, and they'll be focusing on community concerns through engagement with businesses, proactive policing, the targeting of repeat offenders through the Revoy program, as well as working with stakeholders in community and health services to better assist our most vulnerable community members. And our aim is to increase public safety for everyone across the board. This team's going to be working days and evenings and will complement our general duty, who's out there 24/7, our bike officers, and our, like I mentioned, our community safety and our bylaw officers. We've got a strong relationship that we work very closely with them. So I'm very excited about where this is going to go. As I said, it's a pilot project starting June 1st, and I'm very optimistic that we've got the right people there and the right mindset. And I'm very excited about the type of results that we're going to see. If what we've seen from this unit since September is anything to gauge on, I'm confident that we're going to achieve our objectives.
Not seeing any questions. I can't see don't see a hand in Councillor Gesselbrock on the screen. I just want to express on behalf of Council our thanks for presenting tonight. And on behalf of the community at large, thank you to you and the members who continue to do what they can to face the challenges of our community. It is much appreciated, and good luck with the recruiting. I know the 3 members who are out on Saturday at the Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Job Fair did a very good job, so wish you well with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Council?
The next item are just committee minutes for receipt. That's the Governance Priorities Committee meeting held on Monday, March the 11th at 1, and the Governance Priorities Committee meeting held on Monday, April the 29th. I have a motion for adoption of the consent items. Moved by Councillor Hemmons, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Anyone wish anything withdrawn from the list? If not, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. We now have delegations unrelated to agenda items. We have Kaylin Libby of Happy Pad and Jeremy Bellsmith, the Nanaimo Churches, Happy Pad, and this is coming in via Zoom, I understand.
Thank you, Your Worship, councillors.
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm speaking on behalf, as mentioned, of the Churches of Nanaimo, and we're grateful for the opportunity to present. Let me just give a bit of background. Many of our churches are asking how we can give back to the city that we love so much, and many of you were very helpful as we asked what the primary needs were. One vital piece we kept hearing, and are hearing again tonight, is the need for safe and secure housing. Some of our churches are in the process of helping with this, but we wondered if there was anything to be done in the meantime, and then we got some generous leads. So we came across services that connect spare bedrooms with people in need of housing. Sadly, none were operating in our area, but there was one that addressed Nanaimo's concerns, and that's Happy Pad. So I'm pleased to introduce to you Callan Libby from Happy Pad to introduce the service.
Thank you very much.
So, Your Worship, and through you to the delegation, we're not seeing them on the line.
I'll happily give you a little extra time as opposed to 5 minutes in order to get past the technical challenges.
Yeah, so was Kaylin Libby going to be attending via Zoom? Because they're not on the Zoom.
That was my understanding. Last we had corresponded, Kaylin was going to be joining us.
Are you able to carry on without them, or do you need them for your delegation? Because they are not here as it stands right now.
Yes, thank you. Sadly, I would not be prepared to move ahead without them. It would be best to hear from them. Perhaps we could rebook if they're not able to join us for some reason.
Okay, well, what we could do is we could put you back in the waiting room or offline for after the next delegation and try to catch up and see where they're at. And if not, we can rebook with you.
That's great. Thank you so much for your understanding.
Yeah, no problem.
Very good. That's what we'll do then. The next delegation then is Alan Clark, Rehousing in Nanaimo in BC. Mr. Clark, good evening. If you'll introduce yourself for the record. You've been here before, so you know the drill. 5 minutes. When you have a minute left, I will let you know. Thank you.
Good evening. You're right, I have been here before. My name is Alan Clark and I live in Chase River. The first time I came to council was April the 8th, and I came with hope and confidence that common sense would prevail. Today I'm here for the third time, disillusioned and frustrated at this council. There seems to be a reluctance from this council to challenge the provincial government and the governance on any subject, no matter how asinine it is. Much of the housing crisis that has happened across BC, including here in Nanaimo, has largely been created by Premier Eby and his government, with this council being complicit in some of their decisions. In 2020, the BC government banned all rent increases for 2 years and banned all evictions for 2 years. Yet the operating expenses were not capped, including this council continuously increasing property taxes every year. Please tell me how a business, any business, big or small, is supposed to survive when their ability to be able to pay their bills is cut off by the government. It drove many landlords out of the rental business and many turning to Airbnb just to be able to survive. Instead of addressing the housing problem, this NDP government starts building subsidized housing for special interest groups. An example, they just completed a rental property in New West for actors and retired actors only. Further, there's another one coming online, also in New West, and this one is for blacks and indigenous people only. In fact, not just blacks, Swahili blacks.
Mr. Clark, I'm going to...
I'm sorry, stop the clock, sir, because you're interrupting me.
I will
Thank you.
stop the
Thank you.
clock, and I
Go
will
ahead.
stop you, sir, for a minute.
Go ahead.
The point of a delegation to City Council is to talk about things that are within the control and jurisdiction of the Nanaimo City Council. So far, you've given us 2 minutes of criticism of the provincial government and its policies.
That's
This is
correct.
not the forum.
I'm sorry?
This is not the forum for that. If you wish to
If this
criticize
council is
provincial...
complicit, sir,
Sir,
if this council is complicit with the government, the BC government, then is the forum.
Mr. Clark,
I'm willing to go on to my last section.
if you carry on with your last section, which I'm going to allow you to do, I'm going to ask you to confine your remarks to things that are within the jurisdiction of this council.
Okay, because let me just come to my last section, because, Mr. Mayor, this is directed directly at you, nobody else. And the first information meeting on the transitional housing in my neighborhood of Chase River, you stated that you had learned a lot, not you, but everybody had learned a lot from Newcastle. And it showed me that this was not going to be happening. That was good. I mean, that was a positive thing. When I came here on the 8th of April, and I expressed my concerns to council regarding this transitional housing and drug use, and asked that you lobby the BC government to make it a dry house, your response was, let me just get this, I want it to be right, that the Croak House is a wet house, and we indulge, and it's our castle, and that's the same with the transitional housing. You know, I found that statement alone tells me how disrespectful you are to me and to my community, because you're always talking about respect. But that was an asinine comment. You owe me and my community a sincere apology. And ask for forgiveness.
Mr. Clark, I'm sorry.
I'm almost done.
Mr. Clark, I'm going to tell you quite bluntly, if you've just come here to attack me personally...
No, sir, I'm asking you to start
Clark,
acting like a mayor.
Mr. Clark, I'm sorry. This is not a delegation. This has nothing to do with the business of council in a formal sense.
And I'm not going to argue. You have condemned our community.
You have a minute.
You can cut me off for anything.
Mr.
You've
Clark,
condemned Chase River to...
Mr. Clark, Mr. Clark, I'm going to ask you to be, I'm going to ask you to be quiet, sir, and sit down. Mr. Clark, if you are not prepared to sit down and be quiet, I will recess this meeting and have you removed. Are we clear? Are we clear, sir? I have told you, sir, remove yourself from the podium. This is not, sir, I am, Mr. Clark? Mr. Clark? Ms. Gurry? Ms. Gurry?
Your worship, is the microphone cut off? And if the delegation won't sit down, then we can have them removed.
If you won't sit down, I will have you removed, Mr. Clark. Mr. Clark, the mic is turned off. Sit down, or I will have you removed. Ms. Gurry?
Yes, Your Worship, we'll get security. Thank you.
Oh, look, my 5 minutes is up. Gee whiz, I didn't get my opportunity. Well, yeah, I see him up there. It's all right. I'm not a person that's destroying my community, sir. You are. You agreed to put this transitional housing in with drugs, and you took all of you all have wet house, and you think that's okay to bring it to my neighborhood? If there were 50 crowds in your house, and 30 of them were
Mr.
drug
Clark, Mr. Clark, I've turned off your mic. I've asked you to sit down. I'm asking you to remove yourself from this chamber.
because this gentleman's.
Call recess.
We're going to recess for 5 minutes.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr.
This is the 2018 redux of the lighting at Nanaimo's historic bastion. I've had the pleasure of being part of the relighting project on this amazing building in downtown Nanaimo. So what we did is we've replaced the original high pressure sodium lights, which basically did an okay job of lighting up the bottom 10 feet of the building, and replaced them with modern LED lighting that has the capacity to change color. We can run through
Yet, have we?
No, Your Worship, we could not locate them online, and we were trying to connect with them, so we might need to postpone it to the next meeting.
All right. Thank you very much. The next item is reports. First one is Municipal and Regional District Tax Renewal Bylaw. Ms. Mercer, good evening, welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. The MRDT in Nanaimo, as you know, is a 3% tax that is levied on short-term accommodation rentals within the city. And there are two types of, for everybody's knowledge, there is two types of revenues that are collected. We collect general revenues, provide a stable and secure funding source for the tourism sector. And the second is MRDT funds that are collected through the online platform, online accommodation platform. And those funds are kept by the city and are used to fund affordable housing initiatives within the community. So every 5 years, the MRDT program needs to be renewed with the province, and our current agreement ends January 1st, 2025. So under normal circumstances, the city would have had till June 30th to submit an application. However, with the election in the fall, the province has asked us to ask the city to submit in early to mid-May. So we've been working on a bit of a compressed timeline for this application. So the city is the designated recipient of the MRDT funds and pays over the general revenues to a third party to administer the program. And since its inception in 2014, the program has been administered by the Nanaimo Hospitality Association. Best practice suggests that the administration of the MRDT program be run through the Destination Marketing Organization, or the DMO. And the DMO for Nanaimo is Tourism Nanaimo. And that's why the city has made the decision to move the administration over to them from the NHA. At their special board meeting on May 1st, Tourism Nanaimo agreed in principle to be the administrator of the program, assuming that the city is successful in its renewal application. So in order to be successful, the application must include approval of the accommodation sector. So what that means is we need agreement from 50% of the properties plus 50% of the hotel rooms. Wider stakeholder engagement and letters of support need to be received. As well, a 5-year strategic business plan must be prepared. So as that plan is now finalized, a copy is attached to the report in your agenda. And this plan broadly outlines how the MRDT funds are going to be spent over the next 5-year term. A service agreement with Tourism Nanaimo must be established, and council must adopt the accommodation tax request bylaw that's before you tonight, as well as a resolution is needed from the RDN to support the application. So staff are here looking for first 3 readings of the bylaw to satisfy that requirement of the application, as well as approval to submit a renewal application for the MRDT program. So we're here happy to answer any questions you might have on it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mercer, and thank you to staff for the work on this. Any questions? Not seeing any. Councillor Thorpe, please.
I will move that the accommodation tax request bylaw 2024, number 7383, to renew the municipal and regional district tax, MRDT, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Thorpe.
I will move that the bylaw pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Thorpe, please.
And I will move that the bylaw pass third reading.
And again, seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will now move that Council direct staff to submit an application to Destination BC for a renewal of the municipal regional district tax effective 2025 January 1st to 2029 December 31st following adoption of the bylaw.
Seconded, Councillor Manley. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is Development Variance Permit Application Number DVP 463-4978 Fillinger Crescent. Mr. Holm, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening to you and Council. This is a development variance permit to vary the required parking for a residential property from 3 required spaces on site to 0. It's a bit of a unique situation, a home that's existed on the property since the mid-1980s. Quite a steep slope from the road. The ability to accommodate on-site parking is not really practicable. There's an existing home, and what they're proposing to do is to put in a secondary suite, which would require an additional parking stall. So 3 would be required. There are currently 0 provided on site, and the variance would be from 3 to 0. Notification has been provided, as well as a number of letters of support included with the in the agenda package with the application. I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions. Is there anyone here wishing to speak to Development Variance Permit Application Number DVP 463-4978 Fillinger Crescent? Not seeing anyone. Councillor Hemmens moves the recommended motion. Councillor Thorpe seconds. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is item 12C, Development Permit Application Number DP 1307-924 Old Victoria Road. Mr. Holm, again, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This item is an interesting development in the South End neighborhood. There's a lot on the agenda tonight, and much of our time and energy spent on housing, which is of course much needed. But this project brings proposed 4-building light industrial development to Nanaimo's South End neighborhood. So it's I2 zoned. Current zoning is I2. That aligns with the light industrial designation in city plan. The proposal is, again, 4 buildings, 17,000 square meters of floor area roughly in 4 buildings. It's quite a large site, actually, a 2.4 hectare site. Thank you. You can see the plan overhead or on the screen, the concept plan there. 3 of the buildings would be accessed off the unconstructed 8th Street internally, and 1 would be accessed from Old Victoria. The proposal includes variances. One variance is for the combined height of fence and retaining wall from 3 meters to 7.34 meters. and as well as the height of building number 4, a proposed variance from 12 meters to 16.5 meters. And if you could bring up the attachment E, the building renderings, you can get a sense of the design of the development, quite a contemporary industrial design and a good addition to industrial floor space in the city. This was reviewed by the Design Advisory Panel with recommendations provided and amendments subsequently made to address the recommendations. It aligns with the city's applicable development permit area guidelines, and staff are recommending approval. Happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions, but is Mr. Sid Landholt in attendance via Zoom to answer any questions? If council has any questions? Again, I'm not seeing any. And that was the only purpose of Mr. Landholt to attend. Councillor Armstrong moves the recommended motion. Councillor Hemmens seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is Development Procedures and Notification Bylaw. Mr. Holm, yours again, please.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship. This item is familiar to Council. It was considered recently at March 11th, 2024 GPC. This is an update to the city's development approval procedures and notification bylaw. Current bylaw has been in effect since 1991 with amendments as recently as 2022, but this is a full overhaul of that bylaw, replacement with a new bylaw. The development approval procedures and notification bylaw outlines development approval requirements, development application requirements, notification requirements related to development applications, and other administrative matters that address development approval requirements. At the March 11th GPC, Council considered a couple of items and provided, or the committee considered a couple of items that were recommended to Council, including increasing the notification radius for official community plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications from, it was previously 10 meters plus road dedication to 100-meter notification area. That was direction coming from Governance and Priorities Committee that's been incorporated into the amendment bylaw that's drafted in front of you tonight. As well, the committee on March 11th directed recommended that PIMS, public information meetings, be held in relation to official community plan and zoning amendment applications, as well as for development permit applications with significant variances that fall outside of delegated approvals. Other significant proposals in this new bylaw are requirements for a pre-application meeting, some provisions to manage inactive applications, which is a challenge that staff have and is addressed in the bylaw, as well as updates to public hearing notice and signage templates for applications. This responds to, the proposed bylaw also responds to recent development approval process review the city has undertaken, as well as responding to the requirements of Provincial Bill 44. I'm happy to take questions. Otherwise, the bylaw is in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holman. I just want to extend thanks on behalf of Council to you and staff. Meeting the requirements of the provincial changes and bringing things into line has been no small task. We well appreciate it. Any questions on this? Not seeing any. Councillor Thorpe, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move that Development Procedures and Notification Bylaw 2024, number 7375, to establish development and notification procedures pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Manley. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Councillor Thorpe.
I'll move that the bylaw pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. Perhaps we'll give Councillor Armstrong a moment if it's not a emergency.
I don't think she was not in the room for this motion, so please go ahead without
All right.
her here.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you.
And I will move that the bylaw pass third reading.
Seconded Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is increasing housing options in small-scale multi-unit housing. Mr. Holm again.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Mr. Horn and Ms. Rowett here to support you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for recognizing that. So yeah, this is a significant item. It's actually been before council a couple of times in different forms, as you'll hear shortly. This responds to both Provincial Bill 44, small scale and multi-unit housing requirements, as well as the city's increasing housing options project that was through consultation last year and was a follow-up implementation piece from City Plan, Nanaimo Reimagined, the city's official community plan. I won't say too much about it. Mr. Horn has a presentation prepared, but this has been a significant item, a significant amount of work that's impacted many service areas within the city, including engineering and GIS and others that were helping to model the impacts of what's proposed here and help us prepare what's before you tonight. This has been a project led by Mr. Horn and in Ms. Rowett's current planning section, as well as heavily supported by community planning, Ms. Brinkman and her team as well. So it does respond to the provincial requirements, as well as respecting the Nanaimo context, city plan policy goals and objectives as much as possible, and as well as the provincial site servicing standards, which you'll hear about from Mr. Horn. So happy to turn it over to him, and we're happy to take questions later. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Horn, good evening.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, so as Council will recall, we began work on the Increasing Housing Options project in 2023. And we had engagement occurring in the fall of 2023. In December of last year, we did bring a report to Council that summarized the engagement that we had heard. So I would encourage you to refer back to that report. And we also do include in the report this evening, Attachment A, a summary of the Increasing Housing Options initiatives. Of these initiatives, there are two parts that have been adapted and incorporated into the response to the provincial requirements, and that is our secondary suite regulations and the infill housing in existing neighborhoods. So also last fall, it was a busy time, of course, the province introduced Bill 44, and one aspect of that bill was the small scale and multi-unit housing. The SSMUH, it has requirements around secondary suites, as well as around number of dwelling units required across the province. So in Nanaimo, we are now required to permit 3 or 4 dwelling units. And in other places in the province, in proximity to frequent transit, the province will require up to 6 units. Currently in Nanaimo, we do not require 6 units, as we do not have frequent transit. That meets the provincial definition. So the province has identified restricted zones. These are the zones in the city of Nanaimo that have been identified as restricted zones. And these are the 3 zones that we are proposing to pre-zone properties to meet the provincial requirements. Staff will note that these are, in fact, existing zones in the city of Nanaimo, and we are proposing kind of tweaks and revisions to these zones, text amendments, as we pre-zone properties to these 3 zones. And also just pointing out that we have referred to the city plan designations here to inform which zones we would pre-zone properties to. The province has also allowed for exemptions where pre-zoning will not necessarily occur. And so I've highlighted these here on this slide that show some of the exemptions, which include lots not connected to utilities, lots where the minimum lot area for subdivision is greater than an acre, lots that are greater than 40-50 square meters an acre, lots in the North Slope area, as well as lots within transit-oriented areas. And we would also just point out here that while we're not necessarily pre-zoning all these properties that are exempted, it doesn't preclude property owners from applying to rezone if they do meet city plan policies. So this is the map of the areas being pre-zoned across the city. And so, of course, this is just showing an overview, not property specific, but if you refer to the attachment package today in attachment D, you will see the maps that do show the property by property pre-zoning. Just to note, what we can see on this map is just the scale of the lands being pre-zoned, specifically to the R5 zone, which will in fact cover most of the city should this be adopted.
And again, just to be clear for anyone who's listening, Mr. Horn, this is to bring us into compliance with provincial legislation.
That's correct, yes. You may recall with the increasing housing options last fall, we did have a similar proposal for pre-zoning to the R5 zone, but it didn't cover the same extent of the city, the same area. It was concentrated in the neighborhood land use designation in city plan. So this is just a snapshot of some of the text changes, the tweaks to the R5 and the R14 zone. And again, I'm just recalling that the R5 zone is the zone that will, in fact, cover most of the city going forward if adopted. So just a few items to highlight here. In the R5 and R14 zones, we are proposing to remove the density cap of floor area ratio to provide for more flexibility in how people can achieve 3 or 4 units as required by the province on these lots. We are also proposing to increase the building height in the R5 zone to align with the best practice for 3-story building form, which is envisioned to be one of the principal building forms for the SSMUH housing. We'll also note here that in the R14 zone, we haven't proposed to increase the height. The R14 zone in the Old City is a bit different because we measure building height to the midpoint of a pitched roof, and we felt that that still, I think, worked with the character of the neighborhood. And through the consultation with IHO, we didn't hear too many concerns with the building height for people currently working in the R14 zone and building in the R14 zone. We'll also note that the front yard setbacks have been reduced in both the R5 and the R14 zones. This is based on, again, some of the consultation we did last fall in order to help activate street frontages, but also maximize rear yards. And so you'll see our rear yard setbacks we haven't proposed to reduce across the board there. The idea being that we wanted to have buildings where possible move closer to the street and still maintain that rear yard. And then the last item here, just to show on the table, is the lot area for subdivision. So we are proposing to reduce the lot area for subdivision in the R5 zone. But we should also note, of course, that a lot of properties will be pre-zoned that are below these lot areas. These are only applicable at the time of subdivision. So someone on a smaller lot could, in theory, still attempt to develop at 3 and 4 units. One zone we didn't put on the slide here, but just wanted to mention as well, is our Corridor 1 residential corridor zone. Because there are properties in our corridor designations going to the Core 1 zone, which does allow for multifamily and limited commercial uses. Building heights up to 6 stories and up to a 2.0 FAR. So we are proposing this as an interim measure where basically on appropriate sized lots to incentivize owners to consolidate in order to develop under the building form envisioned by city plan, which is more intensive development than 3 and 4 units. Now, I won't go through all of the proposed amendment bylaw for the zoning. There are a number of text amendments in there, but I'll just highlight a few here. One is we are still proposing some additional density for older homes. Those are ones where we have identified as constructed before 1975. For those older homes where preserved to have additional density in the old city. So you may recall this was something we again consulted on last fall with increasing housing options and was seen as a popular initiative. We are only proposing this within the old city, but I just wanted to flag it as something that if it is popular and there is interest in it, we could look at in the future expanding that beyond the old city. But for the time being, we felt it appropriate to just look at it in the old city for the additional density. Just a couple other things here. The limit of 2 principal buildings on a lot in the R5 zone, which would be to help have most efficient use of space on these lots, rather than having 4 detached houses out on these R5 lots. We felt that the limit of 2 principal buildings would be the most efficient siting on these properties. We're also suggesting to introduce secondary suites in duplexes, townhouses, and row houses. And this is something that the province has allowed since 2019, but we haven't strictly recognized in our zoning bylaw. And then lastly, our revisions to our R7 zone to provide a transitional kind of missing middle zone between our R6 townhouse zone and our R8 kind of apartment building zone. So going back to the kind of R5 and the R14 zones, which will be covering most of the city, just wanted to show some examples of the building forms that would be permitted by the proposed zoning here. So some of these building forms are the same as what we currently already permit in our zoning bylaw. If, for example, in the R1 zone, we note the single residential dwelling and the single residential dwelling with secondary suite, which are permitted broadly across the city already. There are some new building forms here that we don't currently permit. So in the bottom left corner, we're showing a single residential dwelling with secondary suite and detached suite. We don't currently allow both on a lot anywhere in the city. You would either have to have a carriage house, a detached suite, or a basement suite, not both. We are suggesting now that could be one of the building forms permitted in the R5 and R14 zones. We are also suggesting, again, duplex with suites as one of the options to achieve the SSMUH minimum housing requirements. And then, of course, in the bottom right corner, just an example of 4 principal dwelling units. And then some of the building forms that we aren't proposing to be permitted. So one example would be a single residential dwelling with 2 secondary suites, in addition to a single residential dwelling with 2 detached suites, so 2 carriage houses. Nor have we proposed permitting a duplex with a detached suite, or a fourplex, each with a suite in the R5 and R14 zones. And the reason for that is we don't want to inadvertently allow for 8 units in our 3 and 4 unit zoning. And just would note, though, in some of our other zones, for example, the R6 or R7 zone, you could still now, if this is adopted, do townhouses with suites. It would just be in the R5 and the R14 zones that would not be permitted. And then at the very bottom here, the last one, is 3 or 4 dwelling units in more than 2 buildings, except in the R14 zone. So we are suggesting that could be permitted, or could be permitted in the R14, the Old City zone. And one of the reasons for that is we do have site design controls through development permits still in the Old City, whereas in the remainder of the city, 4 units and less do not trigger a development permit unless a variance is requested. And so there would be no design review at the staff level. But in the Old City, there still is, so we are offering more flexibility in that R14 zone. So just some practical considerations. One important one being that given that this is the maximum allowable density now permitted, or likely will be permitted in most zones or most lots in the city, it should be important for property owners to note that this doesn't mean it will necessarily be feasible on their lot, even if the zoning would allow for it. There are constraints that they will have to consider, such as parking requirements, building code, servicing. Another of the constraints we identify in the report is possible fire flows. So the amount of water available at fire hydrants for firefighting, that will need to be addressed at the building permit stage by applicants. So pending council direction this evening, staff do intend to return with bylaw introduction on May 27th, and that would give us enough time to meet the provincial deadline of June 30th for compliance. And again, just wanted to note that here at the end, we do say 2024-25 comprehensive review of zoning bylaw, and just wanted to remind council that there is an ongoing review. We will continue to review our zoning bylaw for compliance with city plan, and a lot of the measures here we are suggesting as interim measures as we work within a short time frame to address the provincial requirements, but there will be opportunity to monitor and return with zoning bylaw updates if needed as part of our comprehensive review. Okay. Well, thank you. I had a last slide that just said questions, but so I'll open it up for questions, I guess.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate, as Mr. Holm has emphasized, what a challenge this has been and the amount of work involved. And I see Councillor Brown, who does have some experience in planning, nodding his head sagely in agreement. This is quite the effort, everyone. Thank you. Councillor Himmons, please.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the presentation. Something you just said about firefighting flows, if those aren't adequate, it will have to be addressed by the proponent at the time of development. What does that mean, that a developer will have to put in bigger pipes so we have greater ability to fight fires with the new density?
Yes, through the chair, that's a very good question. Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily mean that there would be off-site requirements. What we would require is to be satisfied that the available fire flows, the required fire flows for that development, we do have those fire flows available at the nearest fire hydrant. So there could be different ways that could be addressed. I would suggest the worst case scenario would be off-site upgrades, but in reality there are design changes you could consider at the building stage, planning of the building, whether it's greater distance between from the property line, or even I think there's some design solutions with firewalls in the buildings to try and help reduce the required fire flows for that development. So it just would have to be some extra thought put into how you come up with those plans. And we are producing mapping that will show fire hydrants where we do believe there are insufficient fire flows for that type of housing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comment further as a result of Mr. Sims' discussion with you? No? Mr. Holm?
Sure. Mr. Sims was just generously offering his support, as he always does, but with addressing any of the engineering questions, we've been working closely with his team on much of this as well. I was just going to mention, follow up and add to what Mr. Horn mentioned and highlighted in the report. There are some proposed amendments to the city's building bylaw as well that would try and address some of the items that Councillor Hemmons raised through the building permit process.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. Just a question on water, actually. So when it's more for the new infill areas, and you know, we know a lot of our pipes are older. We just had another burst pipe again the other day. Who's going to be responsible if the pipes that they're taking aren't large enough to take on that? Is that going to be on the developer, or is there going to be a partnership between the city and the developer to fix aging infrastructure?
Mr. Sim, please.
Thanks, Your Worship. Just briefly, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing with the echo where I'm sitting, but I understand that your question was around upgrading old pipes in the case of developers. In this particular case, it's the asset management side of things. Older pipes are already in the plan. This change to the zoning is not anticipated to result in any larger pipes as a result. It's really based on fire flows is how pipes are sized. So it should not increase or require an increase. As Mr. Horn mentioned, one of the options, if a developer needs to increase fire flows for their specific property, would be to do off-site upgrades, but that would be probably a last resort. That would make it not very economic.
So you're pretty confident then that our aging infrastructure can handle new development in the older areas?
In this particular case, I am. Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. You made this point earlier, but I think it bears repeating, and I just want staff to confirm, because any of our viewers or listeners, I hope, recognize that these are significant and major changes upcoming to our community. And what the city is doing is in response to being told we have to meet provincial legislation. Is that a fair statement, Mr. Holm?
Yes, that is correct, through Your Worship, to Councillor Thorpe. Although, to clarify too, the city was in the process of looking at increasing housing options initiatives coming out of city plan that would have been the official community plan review that would have done more, and Mr. Horn spoke to that a little bit, more of a targeted contextual update to infill housing options. What the province has required is that municipalities greater than 5,000, greater than population of 5,000, thank you, Mr. Horn, allow for, before June 30th of this year, allow all properties greater than 280 square meters to be permitted to have up to 4 dwelling units. So we can't allow them, we can't restrict to less than 4 dwelling units on properties larger than 280 square meters, which I've got the numbers in the report, but that's that category is 22,000, roughly 22,000 properties in the city, as well as some others. So total over 23,500 properties in the city, by estimate, are being rezoned as a result of the provincial requirements, and that is a requirement of the province that was adopted at the end of last year, required to be implemented by June 30th of this year. Happy to clarify further if required, but
no, thank you. I just think it's important that the public understands that we're being pushed down this path, and I totally understand that the city was looking already at strategies for increasing density, and I'm fine with that. I'm not comfortable with some of these changes that are being pushed upon us, but I also recognize that staff have been searching hard for reasonable ways to comply with the legislation, but at the same time giving our neighborhood some option and some discretion of the type of housing that's allowed. One question, if I may, Your Worship, and I don't know if staff can answer this, but I'm not familiar in detail with the provincial legislation, but we've heard referenced the effects on infrastructure, demands on water, fire services, parking, which will be a huge issue, I suspect. Does the provincial legislation in any way recognize or address those potential ramifications?
Thank you. Through your worship to Councillor Thorpe, I'll try and address that. There were other provincial bills that attempted to address some of the impacts through, for instance, changes to development cost charge allowances, what we can charge development cost charges for, as well as amenity cost charge, which is a replacement to sort of the community amenity contribution. So we can look at charging for properties through development for amenities. As well, we do have the ability, and Mr. Sims can speak to in greater detail, but we have had, and we do have the ability to plan and upgrade infrastructure to meet needs in the community, obviously. So there are provisions in the provincial legislation that do allow, to support and address some of the impacts of this growth. Obviously, it's going to change. I think it'll be a little bit more incremental in many areas than some areas we may see where there's older housing stock, larger lots. We may see more of this type of infill development. In many areas, especially areas with newer homes, it may not be, because we have allowed secondary suites for decades here, in addition to suites in accessory dwelling units in many cases. So it is definitely a shift, and it is not to downplay it. I mean, this is the biggest change in local government land use approvals and sort of the patterns of community growth at the neighborhood level in decades. For sure, it's impactful, but I do think it will be incremental and over time. There will, of course, as Councillor Thorpe pointed out, there'll be concerns around parking, for sure, impacts on some of the service delivery, solid waste pickup, things like that. There will be complaints, there will be concerns that aren't addressed in the legislation. For instance, cul-de-sacs, there's no ability for local governments to limit the development that might take place on a cul-de-sac, and obviously sanitation, solid waste pickup on a cul-de-sac is already challenging at some points. Those types of things, snow removal, obviously there'll be more challenges as more people are parking on streets, but I think it will be over time and incremental in many areas, and definitely, it's marking a change in direction and course in how the city develops, but it does also align largely with city plan policies. It's just a little less contextual and more indiscriminate than what the infill project that staff had been informing council on in December. Hopefully that helps. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate your answer, and I appreciate staff's hard work on this file. I guess anytime there is fairly rapid change, I'm always leery of unintended consequences. But I think we're doing our best to handle this as best we can, considering that, as I say, we're being forced down this road. So we do the best we can. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to staff for the presentation. It was very informative. A couple of questions. One, in the report, it talked about concerns about areas where we do want higher density, where they could be doing fourplex or threeplex, and that would kind of get in the way of more land assembly for larger buildings. Is that what the Core 1 designations are for, to encourage the larger buildings?
Through Your Worship, I'll try and address Councillor Manley's question. Exactly, that's exactly what we're trying to address there. There are other areas we're concerned. The province didn't allow municipalities to put any measures in place to protect areas where these are restricted zone lots, where restricted zone lots existed in areas that we're actually targeting higher density. So one of the prime concerns is that that we're potentially going to see the erosion of density potential in areas that we'd like to see density. So that is the core interim corridor zone approach is an attempt to address that. And there are still some areas that we're concerned with that potential. But again, this is, as Mr. Horn mentioned too, this is an interim measure. We are looking at a more fulsome update of the zoning bylaw. We have to, through 2014, we have to update our housing needs assessment. That's another provincial requirement, and update our official community plan to reflect that, and then update our zoning bylaw as well. That will be happening through the latter part of 24 and then through 2025. So I think we'll be able to limit the potential for the impact of that happening, but it's a good point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just, I know it was in the presentation, and I just want to be clear about this because we did get questions about this at a previous meeting. When somebody has an R5 zoned lot, they can still build a single family home if that's what they choose to do. Is that correct?
Yes, through the chair, that is correct, yeah. And so you saw, I think earlier, we did have a slide showing potential building forms. And within the proposed R5 zone, one of those building forms would still be a single residential dwelling or a single residential dwelling with suite. And so a next step that I didn't mention here is going to be communications, of course. So a lot of people will be asking now, my property is now R5, what does that mean? Right. So we'll be looking at including that information in our communications with the public going forward.
Great. Yeah, I think communication's key on this because people get confused quickly with changes like this and are unsure of exactly what they can do or thinking that it means something that it's not. So thank you very much for the presentation and your work. There's a lot of work involved in this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you. Is my audio coming in okay there? I was frozen there for a bit.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, great. Through you, just a question. In terms of lots where another house could be built with a suite, is there changes in sort of the strata regulations, like in terms of ownership, or would that, like, are you allowed to stratify if the buildings are separate? I'm just thinking of older homes where another home could now be built on the same lot.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Gesselbrock. So that's covered under the Strata Property Act. You're thinking of a case where there's an existing home on a lot, somebody builds another home and they want to stratify them under the Strata Property Act. So the Strata Property Act has provisions, requirements that must be upheld, including substantial compliance with current building code for any building that's included in the strata. So there are no changes to those provisions. That's at the provincial level. It's a requirement that the city looks at through its approving officer capacity. But yeah, there are no changes to the strata conversion requirements. So yeah, the same requirements as previously applied would still apply to strata conversion applications going forward.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions from anyone. Anyone care to make a recommended motion? Moved Councillor Hemmons, seconded Councillor Brown. Any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is F, Transit-Oriented Area Designation Bylaw and Off-Street Parking Bylaw Amendments. Mr. Holm, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to stall a minute while the next team gets in place here. So this item is actually familiar to Council as well. It was presented at Governance and Priorities Committee March 25th. This is a response to Bill 47, another provincial bill, a requirement around transit-oriented developments and related off-street parking bylaw amendments. I won't go into any further detail. I've got Kasia Began here on Ms. Brinkman's team. Ms. Lisa Brinkman manages the community planning section, and they've been lead on this project. I'll turn it over to Ms. Began to discuss the transit-oriented area bylaw, and then Ms. Brinkman's going to speak to the proposed off-street parking bylaw amendments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good
Please.
evening, Mayor and Council. So we don't have a presentation today, but we just have a few speaking points in relation to the staff report that's on the screen. So as directed by Council and the provincial legislation, staff are bringing forward a transit-oriented area designation bylaw, which includes the following key components. So definitions that are for ease of use, mapping of the 3 TOAs. So as a reminder, Vancouver Island University, Country Club, and Woodgrove. And then the prescribed minimum density and height framework. So for the mapping that's contained within the designation bylaw, unlike the previous iterations that were shown to Council, parcels where exemptions and limitations apply are not shown. This is to reflect the range of local government, provincial, and federal regulations and statutes that may supersede or have a limiting effect on the TOA designation bylaw. So for example, if a parcel were to get rezoned, this map would not need to be amended. As for the new prescribed minimum density and height framework, if you recall, this is the new minimum by which local governments may not reject a rezoning proposal based on the density or height now prescribed in the TOA designation bylaw. To address concerns raised by local governments on the impact the framework will have on securing community benefits such as non-market housing, as an interim measure, the province has placed a pause on enforcing the framework and has granted local governments the continued use of the density bonus tool with the provincial density height and density envelope until such time as local governments develop and implement new proactive planning tools. So one example is inclusionary zoning, where local governments can require non-market housing in new developments. So staff are recommending that Council pass or proceed to first, second, and third reading of the transit-oriented area designation bylaw. And I'll pass over to Ms. Brinkman to speak about the parking.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So Bill 47 also requires that the city amend the off-street parking bylaw to not require parking spaces for any residential use in a transit-oriented area. So the city may still have design requirements for parking spaces and can still require parking for other uses such as commercial, and still require accessible parking and bicycle parking and electric vehicle charging equipment in parking areas. So staff have reviewed the provincial policy manual for TOAs, transit-oriented areas, and the city's parking bylaw, and 17 amendments are proposed to the parking bylaw. So the 3 key amendments that I'll just summarize. So the first being no required parking for residential use in a transit-oriented area. But there were unintended consequences of Bill 47 that required other amendments to the parking bylaw. So many of our requirements, such as for small car spaces or accessible parking, is based on a ratio or a percentage of the required parking. But since in transit-oriented areas, we can't require parking, we kind of had to amend that throughout the bylaw. So instead, we're saying, of all the parking shown on your parking plan, your approved parking plan as part of your development, the same ratio would apply, the 40% for small car spaces and that. So we've just changed the terminology from required to all parking shown on your approved off-street parking plan. So that's the majority of the changes. One staff recommended change that will have an impact to proposed new development in transit-oriented areas is to require that one long-term bicycle parking space be provided for each multiple family residential unit in a transit-oriented area. So a long-term bicycle parking space is a secure location indoors to store a bike. So the current rate is to require 0.5 long-term bicycle spaces per unit, and we're proposing to increase that to 1 in transit-oriented areas, 1 per unit in transit-oriented areas. And this rate is consistent with Kelowna did a similar change in regards to transit-oriented areas, and Victoria requires a little bit more per unit, and Burnaby actually requires 2 long-term bicycle parking spaces per unit. So That's a high-level summary of the proposed 17 changes to the parking bylaw, and staff is recommending that council proceed with first and second reading of the proposed amendments to the parking bylaw, and to proceed to public hearing. The parking bylaw does require a public hearing be held in relation to any changes to that bylaw. So, thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. In order, Councillors Armstrong and Himmons.
Thank you. When you were looking at the parking bylaw, did you look at the fact of the size of our small car spaces, knowing now that cars are on average 3 to 4 inches larger? Did you take that into consideration? Because I know there's a lot of issues where cars aren't fitting into our small car spots, and they are technically small cars.
Thank you for your question. And we really, when reviewing this round of edits to the parking bylaw, we're really trying to focus really on key changes necessary in relation to transit-oriented areas. But I can assure you one priority project that Transportation Department is leading is to do a review of the parking bylaw and other parking bylaws in the city. And so that review will be commencing shortly and will be more of an overhaul or, comprehensive review of the parking bylaw.
Thank you. I'll be voting against this, even though you guys did a lot of great work, because I think it's wrong that the province has done this. Thank you.
Councillor Himmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I apologize if I missed this in a previous conversation. This is transit-oriented areas. I just noticed in the news that Saanich did what they were required, but then also added 3 transit-oriented areas of their own, where they're allowing increased density and height and no parking, et cetera. Is that something that we would consider? And if so, have we considered where we might put that?
Perhaps I could answer that question. So really, in many ways, our city plan does designate urban centers, and they were really based on the same planning philosophy of having those be mobility hubs. So it is certainly something the city could do. It's not something we considered as this project because our city plan is so new and already is based on a similar planning theory of, and we have the urban centers designated in city plan.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gesselbrock.
Thanks. Sorry, just a clarification on the report. Does it include the downtown as a transit-oriented area? The potential hub, or would that be added in after?
Go ahead. Okay, my mic's already on. Through the mayor to Council Gesselbrock, no, the downtown is not included as a TOA per the provincial legislation.
And say, for example, if a transit hub is created down there, would that then qualify to? Would we be required to have it as a TOA?
So, according to the province, they would inform us should that occur. So we would receive notification that a new TOA is being designated within the city of Nanaimo, and that there would be time to work with the regional district of Nanaimo in determining how that TOA is designated and when.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I much appreciate this. Councillor Thorpe, I think, not seeing any questions.
Thank you, Your Worship.
It's all right.
Thank you. I will then move that Transit-Oriented Areas Designation Bylaw 2024, number 7382, to implement transit-oriented areas as required by Bill 47, Housing Statutes and Associated Regulations, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Himmons. All those in favor? Councillors Eastmere, Himmons, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Brown, Councillor Manley, Councillor Gesselbrock. Are you opposed or in favor?
In favor.
In favor. And those opposed, Councillor Armstrong. Motion carries. Thank you.
And I will move that the bylaw pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Himmons. Any discussion? If not, seeing none, all those in favor, Councillors Eastmere, Himmons, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Thorpe, Councillor Brown, Councillor Manley, Councillor Gesselbrock, are you in favor?
In favor.
Thank you. And opposed, Councillor Armstrong. Motion carries. Thank you.
And I will move that the bylaw pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Himmons. All those in favor, Councillors Eastmere, Hemmens, Mayor Krog, Councillors Thorpe, Brown, Manley, Councillor Gesselbrock. You're going to have to raise your hand up by your head, otherwise we can't see it, but thank you. And those opposed, yes. Councillor Armstrong, motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move that off-street parking regulations amendment bylaw 2024 number 7266.03 to implement amendments related to transit-oriented areas, Bill 47, housing statutes and associated regulations, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor, Councillors Eastmere, Hemmens, Mayor Krog, Councillor Brown, Councillor Manley, Councillor Gesselbrock. Those opposed, Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Thorpe. Motion carries. Thank you.
I will move that the bylaw pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. Any discussion?
Yes.
Councillor Thorpe, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm sorry, I just can't support this with all respect to staff, and I appreciate their efforts. And again, I recognize that we are responding to provincial legislation largely through this. I just see this as part of an ongoing attack on cars and parking. I consider it extremely unrealistic and unattainable, and I don't think it's fair to our citizens, so I will not support this.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I agree with everything Councillor Thorpe has said, and not only that, we're going to see an increase in parking in neighborhoods, and there are going to be more neighborhood disputes. We're going to have more police required and more bylaws just to enforce this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the positions taken by Councillors Thorpe and Armstrong. I'll let Councillor Brown go first if he wants, though.
Thanks, Your Worship. I would say let's just let the free market decide. We are.
Thank you very much. It's a fairly simple proposition for me. We are required to bring our bylaws into in accordance with the provincial legislation. I don't see much choice. Having said that, I will be supporting the motion. All those in favor? Councillors Eastmere, Hemmens, Mayor Krog, Councillor Brown, Councillor Manley, Councillor Gesselbrock. Those opposed, Councillors Armstrong and Thorpe. Motion carries. Thank you.
I will move that Council direct staff to proceed to a public hearing for bylaw 7266.03 prior to consideration of third reading and final adoption as required by section 2.3 of the off-street parking regulations bylaw 2018 number 7266.
Seconded, Councillor Manley. All those in favor?
Yes.
Voting in favor of public hearing, Councillor Brown.
While I can.
Councillor Gesselbrock. Very good, thank you. We are on to bylaws. 13, zoning amendment bylaw 2023. Thank you, Ms. Began, Ms. Brinkman, appreciate it. Zoning amendment bylaw 2023, number 4500.216.
Ready? Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that zoning amendment bylaw 2023, number 4500.216 to rezone 6074 Metro Drive from single dwelling residential R1 to residential corridor COR1 be adopted.
Seconded. Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion. Oh, you're opposed? Sorry. Anyone else opposed? No. Motion carries. Thank you. The next is 2024-2028 Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that Financial Plan Amendment Bylaw 2024, number 7371.01, to amend the 2024 to 2028 Financial Plan be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. The next is property tax rates bylaw 2024, number 7380.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will move that property tax rates bylaw 2024, number 7380, a bylaw to set the property tax rates for 2024, be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. All those in favor? Any opposed? None. Motion carries. Thank you. We have no notices of motion. Under other business, we have the correspondence from the Office of the Ombudsperson, quarterly report, October 1st, December 31st, 2023. And Ms. Gurry, I think I can happily announce to anyone who took the time to look at the report, we basically got a gold star, an A+, however you want to phrase it in terms of the city. So congratulations to everyone involved. Thank you. We're on to question period. I'm sorry, it looks like Jennifer, but I can't make out a last name. Parking in transit areas. Perhaps you could introduce yourself for the record and ask your question, please.
I'm Jennifer. I'm a resident of Nanaimo. I was just concerned myself with the parking that is being discussed here. If you're going to have zero parking in high, like transit areas, the people that are probably going to move there, you know, maybe they're young, but maybe they're going to be lots of seniors. And if the seniors are there, which probably 50% of the population here is the seniors moving here, what if they need home care? What if they need like the DoorDash or the whatever, the Uber's going to come pick them up? I don't know where they're going to bring in the vehicles, or, you know, disputes, but I know RCMP will just sort of stop the car wherever they can and get out. But if it's home care, you're thinking of all the seniors every morning, every night, every day that need, you know, medication several times a day. If 50% of those buildings are occupied by a senior that needs home care, where's the nurses going to come and park with their vehicles with supplies? You're not
I hear a
gonna send them
question
to
coming. You're asking
transit and then take the transit.
Right, but your question, I assume, in there is there zero parking in transit-oriented areas? Ms. Brinkman, perhaps you could answer that for us, please. I think it's pretty clear. Ms. Brinkman?
Thank you for your question. So the province is saying the cities can't require parking in transit-oriented areas. So Nanaimo does have 3, but certainly a developer or whoever's developing a site will construct or build a site to accommodate the uses they want there. So even if we can't require it, the property owner or developer can still provide parking and make a site functional. So we do expect that they will still do that in order, if they need to sell the units, or, you know, people will need a parking space. So we do think parking will still be provided.
But most of what I'm hearing when I'm at the meetings is reduce parking, reduce the parking, reduce the parking. Everyone else is running with their money going, yep, you know, that's what they want, they got what they needed out of it, but the person using it, you know, Nanaimo, like I said, is 50% probably elderly who need help. And I don't think the person that's selling the unit is really going to care about those thoughts. Otherwise, the city, I would think, if you want to welcome the, you know, people here, or, you know, you're going to be demanding that there be a certain amount of parking stalls.
I think I have your point, and Councillor Brown to some extent answered it earlier when he said the private market reply to this and provide the answer. It would be pretty stupid of any developer to develop a property that had no parking unless they felt there was a market for an area with absolutely no parking. Clearly, no senior, no person requiring care, no person who has relatives with a vehicle who want to visit, no person who wants groceries delivered, no person who wants skip the dishes or whatever delivered is going to construct that kind of a building, because no one is simply going to be prepared to pay for it. And if someone is, then clearly they've made up their minds that they have no desire or use for a car themselves and or anyone who visits them. So I take your point, but I think you understand the answer is it's not being prohibited, but if a developer chooses to construct that kind of a facility, housing, whatever, good luck with it, because quite candidly, I don't suspect it'll attract very many purchasers or occupants. It's just going to prove too impossible. Thank you for your question. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favor? Thank you.